Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this panel looking at how businesses are responding to the world of AI. Thank you for the patience while we got the sound issues sorted. So if you look at multinational firms or state-owned enterprises, whether they're small and medium businesses or even self-employed, I don't think many businesses around the world are not looking at AI now and thinking about how it may impact them. If you look at the growth of the market, estimates vary, but according to Bloomberg Intelligence, generative AI alone, that market could reach about $1.3 trillion by 2032, with a compound annual growth rate of about 40%. And looking at different statistics, that 40% mark, 35, 40, 45% seems to be something that comes up again and again when looking at the growth of the industry. But businesses, of course, come in all shapes and sizes. So how should they be responding to AI? How can they make use of the benefits of AI? And how worried should we be about the risks of AI as well, which is something I hope our expert panel can touch upon today. Who's going to regulate it? Can they be trusted? How bad is it going to be for the planet? Those sorts of issues, something that should be front and center, many would argue, for businesses across the world, not just here in the Middle East and North Africa. So we've got the panelists. There's no need to introduce them again. Their names are up there. I'll start to my left then. Suresh, as a business, how important is AI in what you're doing at the moment and the emergence of future technologies?
Doesn't work.
Sorry, yeah, you can take this if that doesn't work, but it should be on now.
Morning. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here. Fantastic gathering. So I am from the business, so I guess I've been spotted as the novice on the panel. But basically, from a business point of view, it's a highly competitive market, and what we see nowadays is that customer demand is kind of constantly changing and very rapidly. The response times are becoming shorter and shorter. So if you're not able to respond, then you lose the opportunity in the market. The other thing is that there is always this need to prioritize the sales channels and the products, the services in the market based on the past data, the behavior of customers and data. So naturally, as a business, we are very keen to kind of leverage data and to be able to make quick and informed decisions to respond quickly, right? So we have been doing this. I can give you some business cases to start with. So we are in the business of food and automotive, hospitality, healthcare, and several other businesses. So I can give you an example in the food business. So where traditionally we were distribution and retail, processing, and very physically oriented kind of an operation. So a few years back, we decided to kind of pivot it to a digital model. So basically wanted to change the behavior of how B2B purchases are made. In the case of UAE with traditional trade, so what we call the groceries, small groceries and small cafeterias in the country. So we kind of figured out that they had to make like 40, 50 phone calls a day to meet their purchase requirements. And so we came up with a platform which is called BuyGrow. And today we are connected with most of the groceries in the country. And they are able to make their purchases through an app. And so we have inventory and we satisfy or we fulfill the requirements. Now, here, our ability to predict the demand on a dynamic basis based on data and to be able to make calls on purchases has helped us to keep our levels at just about 10 to 15 days of inventory, right?
Yeah.
So there are other practical examples as well. Like we did a similar exercise with our automotive business.
Yeah.
So we launched another platform for automotive spare parts. And this time we got all the garages and the fleet owners, the gas stations onto the platform for them to make B2B purchases through the platform.
Yeah.
So in both these cases, the key is for us to understand the data and to be able to exploit and to be able to make the right calls when it comes to meeting the demand and not lose out on opportunities.
Yeah.
At the same time, manage our costs in terms of the purchases as well as the cost of fulfillment.
Essentially, it's about improving operational efficiency, not just for the business, but also for other stakeholders in your pipeline. I just wanted to come to you, Patrik, because the words data cropped up there, as well as platforms. You've looked at both those areas in depth throughout your career, previously at Securitas, where you were Group CEO of cybersecurity. AI, generative AI platforms, are nice to have for businesses or a must-have?
I would say long term it's a must-have. I think, from an innovation point of view, you can start doing AI on all the infrastructure to learn and do that in pockets. But long term, you need to have a proper platform where you can consolidate the data to do insight and analytics in it, because it needs to be a governed environment, because what you're going to notice in the region is going to be more and more policy making and legal and risk associated with AI. Like in Europe, everything that's automated is AI according to the AI Act. You had in Canada 2022, 2024, another legislation. So we need to think about when we do the policy making in the region, but we don't kill the innovation, because that's a little bit what's happening here in the market. A platform enables you in a different way, because you can handle data residency, sovereignty things, because if you have a clear data office and governance of the data in the application itself, you don't need to move it, for example, to cloud. You can actually set up policy engine and automate that and business rules to be able to mask the data that needs to reside on site in country. And like PII data in itself is usually not even needed from an analytic point of view, because you can anonymize to actually see customer behavior. So I would say in the next 2-3 years, we're going to see more and more cloud. You see the investment that Microsoft doing in KSA, that was announced a week ago in Kuwait. You see it also from a Google point of view. So it's here to stay. And we need to actually do that also, because in the region, due to data residency, sovereignty, legal and compliance, it's hard to consolidate on a group point of view, because many companies is operating cross-country. And that's where we need to have legislation helping us and what we can and cannot do.
Thank you very much. Andy, thank you for joining us. I know you've traveled all the way from the United States to be here. The West Coast of the United States, obviously a hub for AI, as is Dubai, the UAE, and the region as well here. China, potentially the third, second, and this area the third. Looking at what you do as a business, you deal a bit more with the hardware, if you like. Business must be booming for you, considering that this AI surge we're seeing around the world is being powered by chips by companies like Cerebras.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. It's lovely to be here. I am very awake. I've had a few cups of coffee, so I'm feeling very good. Look, at Cerebras Systems, we see that there is truly transformative potential for large-scale and generative AI, right? And as you said, in the future, it's really going to be a must-have, right? These are systems and models that have the capability to drive massive revenue and massive efficiency for businesses, from healthcare to finance to public sector, and of course to e-commerce and consumer retail. In addition to data, though, what goes into all AI is domain expertise, models, and at the foundation of all of it, of course, is compute. We need computer systems that are really purpose-built to train these large models, and then once these models are built, right, to deploy them at low latency and high throughput to deliver answers more quickly. And so at Cerebras Systems, we have built a completely new class of processor and computer system that is built from the ground up to accelerate all aspects of large-scale AI, language models, generative AI. The heart of our solution is the largest computer chip on Earth by more than a factor of 50. This is what we call the Cerebras wafer scale engine. It is a purpose-built computer chip to accelerate AI. In our commercial systems, this chip delivers more than 10x faster time to solution than existing GPU clusters. And for models that go into inference, we can run inference models more than 20x faster than any number of GPUs. What this means for our enterprise partners is that we can bring compute and model building expertise to partner with their domain expertise in unique data sets to help them build the model that's right for their business. And so, yeah, it's booming recently. There's been massive demand growth, both for training and inference compute, and we're changing the world.
And there's been a lot of attention around the world in recent years about what you're holding there and concerns about whether you'd be able to have enough raw materials to make that. How concerned are you about supply chains looking at your potential growth as a business?
No, that's great. We're very mindful of supply chain. So we have an extraordinary fab partner that makes this chip for us in TSMC. We have an extraordinary strategic partner here in the UAE, in G42 and Abu Dhabi. We're expanding our partnerships globally. In terms of supply chain specifically, we have multiple redundancies built into all of our supply chain. And we also don't have some of the same bottlenecks in specific supplies as traditional chips. For example, our device, in order to deliver this breakthrough performance for AI training and inference, does not rely on HBM memory, right? And that's one of the constraints in traditional system supply chains is HBM memory. Since we don't have that dependency, we don't have that supply chain issue.
Thank you. Saket, thanks for the patience. I'll come to you now then. You're one of those customers potentially that could use a system like this from an AI perspective. For many of us, I think if we think of AI and the use of it already in our lives, the financial sector may be one area, banking, digital banking, where we're seeing it most evidently. How much of a priority is AI for a company like RAKBANK at the moment, and how much are you investing towards that in terms of headcount and financial investment as well?
Sure. So once again, thanks for having me here. Pleasure to be here. In terms of priority, look, as some of my fellow panelists said, that it's not a matter of if you're going to do stuff around generative AI. I think it's about when are we going to do it? And in terms of priority, surprisingly, it's one of those things that has shot up the priority list quite as I've never seen any other priority shoot up the list quite as fast as Gen AI. I mean, around about this time last year, we were already experimenting with a lot of interesting Gen AI stuff, whether it was focusing on efficiencies for, say, even so I come from the technology world, and therefore getting our developers to be able to generate code more efficiently, to be able to generate unit test cases, all the way to generating chatbot type functionality that is able to manage knowledge bases and able to give good answers on the back of it. Of course, that's not something that we can expose to our customers because of all the challenges with hallucination. There have also been challenges in terms of data residency, data sovereignty, and we needed to find a solution that allows us to keep everything in place. And the pace of change is so fast that there is a high level of investment that is it has already gone into this area. Next year, I would expect that investment to grow by a multiple factor, right? So it's orders of magnitude higher is the way I see it. And the reason for that is because the pace of change is so high. It's like at one point we were thinking about GPUs, and then out came something called LPUs, and then we got wafer scale engines. And it's like every day the pace of change is so fast that it's becoming hard to catch up, and no amount of investment that we put behind it is actually is going to help us.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point, because Patrik, I want to come to you here. Regulation was something you mentioned in your previous answer. As Saket has just outlined, the pace of change is so quick that businesses are struggling to keep up. Regulators seem to have the same problem. How can we try and improve the regulation of this industry across a global scale, given that these are moving across the world, whether it comes to data, or should it simply be down to businesses to self-regulate, or should governments just worry about what's happening within their own borders?
I think you need to have some certain policies and guidelines on how you should apply it. At the same time, all data doesn't need to be regulated. usually 30% of all the data you actually create is reused. 70% is never reused for analytical purposes. So if you want to have regulation like you have from a Europe GDPR, PII data, personal data, it might need it to be regulated. But at the same time, I think we need to think about what needs to be regulated and what doesn't need to be regulated. It might, like, if you have a sensitive model that gives you insight, it might need to be regulated, but the data in itself might not be of importance. So this is the balance you need to think about, because as I said, we want to still have innovation without any hindrance to do this from a regulation point of view. It is challenging if you say AI is everything that's automated, because that put resistance to actually do something, because it's going to become so much legal issues. I worked as a CDO for oil and gas and security companies, and 50% of my time was from a legal point of view. What can you do and can you not do? And then you have a data science department, they just want to have the data. So they want to have innovation. So I think you need to find a balance in how you're doing that in the policy making.
And it's a very delicate balance, because you want to be able to encourage innovation, but at the same time, if something goes wrong, businesses, individuals, they tend to turn to governments to try and sort out those issues. How important is that wider ecosystem, do you think? And what do you make, given your experience in the Nordics, of what's happening here in the Middle East and the UAE, Dubai in particular, when it comes to trying to build this ecosystem here?
I think you're getting rid of this regulation with policy making if you actually can control your data. Take it from a cybersecurity point of view. If you have a data breach, the first thing you want to know, what data did they actually access? If you have regulation, know what data you actually have, it's going to make it so much easier to say, this is the data breach we have, this is what we need to do. The same thing comes from a governance point of view and a regulation point of view. This is more sensitive data, so you need to have full redundancy on the service, you need to have a cybersecurity thinking around it, because everything doesn't need to be governed. And I think that's the first start, to understand what needs to be governed from a government point of view and what needs to be governed from a company point of view, and then from a personal PII point of view also. So it's a balance there. So it's more about not take all data into consideration, take the most important parts of it.
Yeah. And Andy, thank you, Patrik. Andy, one key issue around this is that it's not just individual businesses getting involved, but countries and sovereign nations as well. Some of your clients include private users, but they include sovereign users as well. What sort of safeguards do you think are needed, or how can we ensure that the accessibility of products like yours are improved, so that some countries aren't left behind, some people aren't left behind around the world?
Yeah, certainly. It's a great question. And Patrik, I'm sorry you had to spend so much time with lawyers when you're trying to innovate. Look, I think, first of all, I think a tremendous amount of progress has been made, to Patrik's point, with open source data. So clearly, we can innovate with public and open source data. But also for enterprises and for sovereign interests, as well as for security, there's clearly cases where data needs to be kept private and isolated from an infrastructure standpoint from other data. We've seen both in our work in the UAE and in the US, where we've built models on public data on public systems, and we've also deployed, think of them as dedicated, isolated systems for applications ranging from healthcare to finance to sovereign applications. In the UAE, for example, we partnered with G42 to build an Arabic large language model that's now open source. It's called JACE. It is the world's best performing open Arabic model. And we did that with a combination of public data sets and private data sets. And we're able to make the model using systems currently in the US. To the last part of your question, I think access to high performance computing for AI is critical. It is another must in this business. And at Cerebras, I think one of the things that we're really on a mission to do is put the right high performance AI computing infrastructure into the hands of more organizations and more developers. We're currently working on getting systems into the UAE and into clouds so that they can be accessible for more projects, both open and proprietary and sovereign.
And there has been a movement, at least, including countries in the UAE in recent years, the United States, South Korea, others, looking at some form of global pact to try and regulate the industry. Do you think that's realistic, or is that pie in the sky given the geopolitical tensions we're facing around the world? And how important is it for countries to collaborate on this issue, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really, first of all, I think it's really important for, I understand the interest in national AI initiatives, right? I think it's very important to have public investment and local public investment in large-scale AI, because as a commercial and industry community, we're going to build certain models, right, for certain applications. But I think advancing AI for science, advancing AI for social good, advancing AI for security, these really are the domain of public investment and government. I think that we will see a growth in that, both locally for individual nation states, but I also think we're seeing much more collaboration, both in regions and globally, particularly around those investments in safe, responsible, ethical AI. To your point, this whole industry is moving forward at light speed. So I think it's hard for regulatory bodies to keep up. But I will say we're working directly with many of them now in multiple nations. And once again, in some sense, it comes back to having the right computing platform underneath the hood. Because I think we don't really yet know how to effectively measure risk and regulate models while still allowing research to proliferate. That's an active area of research, so you really want the right computing infrastructure in those safety and responsible AI researchers' hands, so that together we can discover not just how to push the envelope for things like revenue and efficiency and enterprise, but how we can do so in a responsible way.
And I think the communication is an important aspect as well, and platforms like this certainly help to try and drive some understanding amongst general people. Lots of people you meet in the business world, and that's the focus of this, still don't seem to fully understand the technical aspects of it, myself included. For lots of people it goes straight over their heads. So I think just trying to connect what's happening in places like Silicon Valley or anywhere else with how it impacts ordinary people around the world is a really, really important issue. But I want to go back to, I will come back to you before we end. We've got about 17 minutes. I want to take it back to business. Suresh, a company like yours, a conglomerate, operates in more than 100 countries according to your website in terms of the exports. Traditionally, you've relied on logistics, exports. That sort of legacy infrastructure, is that proving a challenge to try and move to the digital world? Or is it fairly seamless? Are staff fairly easy to grasp these technical concepts, as I was just mentioning?
I think it's like we dominated the sectors we've worked on for the last 3 decades or so. Maybe 6-7 years back, we had to kind of take a full review of what's happening and see how we can leverage the strengths we have in terms of infrastructure, market reach, knowledge of markets, the relationships in the market, and how can we undergo a digital transformation to kind of retain the competitive advantage, because the behavior of customers change, and like as I said earlier, the way they make their decisions have also changed, and they suddenly have access digitally to many other vendors where we thought like we probably have created barriers to certain markets. So we figured this pretty early on in the game, and we kind of started working towards how we can get access digitally to customers, and in a way that we still retain the strengths we have on the physical side, but you add this digital layer on top of it and to work in a seamless way. The project we are working on currently, I want to just listening to the other panelists, which is the Abu Dhabi Food Hub. It's nothing but a modern wholesale market. So it's got physical infrastructure, which will house players within the food industry, wholesalers and traders and logistics players and other value-added services there. And what we're trying to do there is to create a differentiation between a pure physical market and how the whole market can be enabled digitally in a way that a client could kind of through, in a very seamless way, access all the services, the government services, be able to interact with other traders and business persons within the hub, as well as trade beyond the limitations of the market within the country as well as cross-border. So this can, I believe, is a great case for AI, and to make things more efficient with predictive demand and for people to optimize their costs in terms of storage as well as the cost of fulfillment, and creates a competitive or a commercial outcome, and the ROI, which as a business we look for, because we don't kind of invest into things that don't benefit
make
us
a profit,
eventually,
yeah.
right? So we had to fight with the board, and we need to have a compelling business case, which I believe in the case of the food hub can create that delta between being a pure physical player and being a player which can add value or a clear, tangible commercial outcome for a client of the hub.
Yeah, and digital, as you say, technology will be key to trying to reshape. That's an idea essentially that's millennia old when it comes to the market and food markets in particular. But Saket, just to come back to you, there are a couple of issues I wanted to cover before we finish. People, talent. I mean, lots of us probably look at LinkedIn on a weekly basis, daily basis, and wonder whether we should have trained as data scientists instead, given the amount of jobs out there at the moment. How much of a challenge is it for a company like yours, a business like yours, to find the right sort of talent needed to drive forward that investment that you outlined earlier?
Yeah. I think talent, I look at it at two tiers almost, right? When it comes to applying AI, I think you don't necessarily need specifically trained talent. It's the same old people with good analytical skills, because what we're really trying to do is to take out inefficiencies in processes, and therefore when people are doing their day-to-day work, then having that creative thinking to be able to apply AI-related concepts to do that kind of work. So that does not need special training. I think what that really needs is the ability to attract diverse talent from a range of industries, rather than just always looking for somebody who's always been in financial services and only knows how to do things in one way. But at the second tier, of course, when it comes to the more specific talent, where we want to be able to build our own language models, for example, right? And not just, I'm not just talking about language models, but just generally AI and data science itself, of course, is it's a rare skill. The good news is that I think with the amount of investments that are happening here in this region, I think just the other day I read that the universities, the MPZ university here for AI, that is actually increasing the cohort as well, right? So there are going to be some 200 odd graduates coming out. I think that's a very, very positive sign, and I think that talent is ultimately what's going to take us forward. But that does not mean that we need to slow down in terms of the investments, because I think there's plenty of low-hanging fruit that we can address even without having that talent, thanks to the existence of open source models and the helps that we can get from fintechs.
Yeah, and the results of institutions like universities often take a few years, at least decades sometimes, to fully be seen within an economy. But just to gain a sense, if you're talking about RAKBANK as a regional bank, an international bank, looking at potentially its own proprietary software in AI, what's the driving force here for a company like yours when it comes to this? Is it customer satisfaction? That may be what the public-facing thing is, but what's driving the ambition? Because it sounds like a lot of ambition for a bank to be creating its own LLMs.
Yeah. I think our ambition is really on three aspects. So first of all, we are not an international bank. We are actually centered in the UAE. But the three things that drive us is, number one is just efficiencies. So just imagine we've got a trove of data, documents from customer relationships that were established, say 20, 30 years ago. And back then, you would just take photocopies of passports, etc. And now just imagine when you have to have KYC requirements and being able to dig through that data and do entity extraction to figure out what that data really says. That can be manually a very, very tedious piece of work. So I heard somewhere that AI will help you address three types of jobs. They are either dangerous, dirty, or dull. Right? Thankfully, we don't deal with anything dangerous or dirty, but there's plenty of dull stuff that we get to do, and so that's one area. The second area is really around enhancing customer experience. I think that is a use case that's slightly further out because of the fact that there is hallucinations and then issues around data protection and how do we make sure that our customers are protected. And the third use case is really all around risk management and fraud. Being able to understand patterns and instead of having somebody eyeball it or somebody have to write the formulae to be able to have these patterns emerge, if we can use LLMs to automatically detect that, I think so. Those are the three areas where we see a lot of.
Brilliant, thank you. Patrik, cybersecurity obviously is a concern because bad actors and criminals around the world are also able to keep up with technology. So that's a concern potentially for businesses and regulators as well. Perhaps one that's not being taken as seriously enough as it should. And I just wanted to touch on another issue as well, if you can, keep that answer brief, and then look at sustainability, because all of this sounds like it's generating a whole lot of data. The World Economic Forum saying the computational power required to keep up with the pace of AI doubling every 100 days. I mean, that's pretty astronomical. Doesn't sound very good for the planet either.
And when it comes to cybersecurity, as I said before, it's really important to understand which data is more important to protect than other data in itself. And in today's society, everyone is data-driven. So it's more about how can you optimize your business? What kind of data do you need to have to get the insights needed? What kind of data do you need to have to get the decisions made? And I also think, from a knowledge point of view and talent, you usually start centralized because you need to have a knowledge center. Then you go out more and more federated into the business to understand what kind of business problem you need to solve. When it comes to sustainability, if you take, ChatGPT, for example, if you do search on that, the consumption is much higher than you're doing in Google. And this is a behavior you need to think about also. How are you behaving from a sustainability point of view? How much amount of compute do you need for certain things? In many cases also, when it comes to compute, in new technologies, you don't actually move data. It's happening within the solution itself. So you don't need to produce so much compute to actually do this. So that's other things that's coming. But I think we need to start, not from a technology point of view, we need to think about what are the business problem or environmental problem or public problem we're trying to solve with the help of this. Because that will automatically also give the sustainability thinking about how we're actually treating everything. But it's a behavioral problem. Like my kids, they love ChatGPT, but they don't utilize Google. And then I said, from a sustainability point of view, it's much more compute in the background. Look, the cost of sending an email from a compute point of view, all these kind of things, and hardware recycling and so on. So it goes into the whole IT sector in everything what we're doing. And I think we are not very mature anywhere when it comes to that, and we could be better.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and it's something that jumped into my head this morning, watching obviously most people's news this morning was the US presidential debate, and they spoke about foreign policy, they spoke about immigration, they spoke about, according to Donald Trump, dogs being eaten in parts of America, but they didn't really touch on technology, they didn't touch on AI, and given the potential reward and risk involved there, it seems something that maybe policymakers aren't really focusing on in the right sort of manner.
Yeah. So I think, from an IT point of view, we need to think about not just from a compute, CPU usage, these kind of things. We need to think from a bigger picture. How can we going to recycle our computers? How we're doing with searches? How many emails do you send? Because everything is associated with power consumption. So it's about efficiency, optimizing, and that's why I said, we don't need to move all the data. That's going to give us sustainability because we know what data is more important to move from a decision point of view.
And again, those are going to be long-term issues, I think, because if you look at recycling 30, 40 years ago, the impact of recycling in some markets like Europe and other places can be witnessed now and how behavior changes, but maybe the digital recycling or digital use of our behavior ought to be reviewed. I'm just going to finish off. We've got about 5 minutes. I'm going to come back to you, Andy, because one thing that's really, really important, and as you said, business is booming, investment is key here for a market like AI and generative AI. We've heard from the other panelists. Everyone says that it's a focus area. They're going to continue pumping money into this. how important is it to sustain that, and is it going to be sustainable? There's quite a bubble around AI at the moment if you look at capital markets, but how important is that sustainability of investment when it comes to the development of AI?
Yeah, so I'll keep it brief. I have maybe two comments, one on the energy sustainability front, and then other on the financial sustainability and economic sustainability from the investment standpoint. First of all, I would like to say nothing about US politics. Second, I should give credit where credit is due. I do think that there are some visionary government leaders that are thinking about the energy efficiency and cost of AI computing. Just yesterday, I was at a US Department of Energy summit on energy efficient high performance computing and AI, where we're talking about exactly this. And in our conversations with UAE leadership, right, obviously there's a lot of excitement around just more performance, more scale, leading the world in AI. But a very fast following topic to that is, how do we make this more sustainable, right? And I think it is actually coming to the forefront of the discussion in governments and in visionary leaders. So credit where credit is due on that. On the investment side, yeah, this is a capital intensive business. At Cerebras at least, we are a hardware project, right? These are more capital intensive than software projects, but we're 8 years in and we've raised over $800 million. And we are driving now a lot of revenue. I think on the enterprise front, right, we're already starting to see enterprise partners build and leverage AI models to increase revenue and drive more efficiency. I think we need that flywheel to continue, right? So we need to see more accurate, better domain-specific AI models for different industries and individual businesses. And we need to see more business leaders raising their hand after making those investments in AI to say, yeah, this is making a difference, right? For example, one of our long-standing partners at Cerebras is GlaxoSmithKline, one of the world's leading pharmaceutical developers, right? And they're building domain-specific AI models on genomic data and other clinical data to accelerate drug discovery, right? And indeed they are. So in discussions with them, we've heard them talk about how AI is accelerating their time to trial, right? And in the business of innovation like that, I think we're really starting to see the signal from market that businesses are starting to see the gains. But we need to see that flywheel continue, and I, for one, am really bullish that over the next several years, we'll see more and more industry leaders from banks to digital and cyber across the market raising their hands saying, yeah, this is making a huge difference in our bottom line.
And essentially joint ventures and taking on some of that risk financially, but also in terms of how it works operationally. But capital markets are really, really important as well. I know it's the firm that shouldn't be named, but if you look at NVIDIA, something that a lot of people around the world are aware of, a competitor to Cerebras, a $100 share 5 years ago would be worth $2,850 today. You guys have spoken about an IPO, you've had a lot of series of funding. Is that on the cards? Are capital markets inevitable for the growth of this industry?
I mean, first of all, I think NVIDIA is an incredible company, right? I started my career in graphics. They make extraordinary graphics processors, and they've taken AI a long way. I do think that purpose-built accelerators are going to be that next generation to power the future of AI, like us at Cerebras. But indeed, you've seen in their market capitalization, I think, the signal that this is truly transformative technology, right? And I think that's really what that share price signal is all about. At Cerebras, our plans are to continue to grow. It is a public fact that we have filed a confidential S1. So we're preparing ourselves to be the best AI compute company on the planet.
Excellent, thank you. And that's perfectly on time. So there's a tip as well. I think in a few years' time, if anyone's share prices rise by a few 100%, you have the Dubai AI Festival to thank for that tip. But thank you so much for all four panelists here. It's been a fascinating discussion, so much that we got through in terms of regulation, sustainability, people and talent, investment, innovation, and then, of course, how businesses are responding to AI and trying to make use of that. So once again, thank you to my four panelists, Suresh, Vaidhyanathan from the Ghassan Aboud Group, CEO of Special Projects and the Abu Dhabi Food Hub, Patrik Eriksson, Director of Data Technology and Delivery at ZainTECH, Andy Hock, of course, Senior Vice President of Product and Strategy at Cerebras Systems, and last but by no means least, Saket, Saith, Group Chief Technology and Data Officer at RAKBANK UAE. Thank you all.